Israel and Lebanon say they have reached an agreement over a disputed part of the Mediterranean Sea. Both countries are claiming an area where there are significant natural gas reserves.
The driving force behind the agreement is the U.S.
On all these issues, we should rely on ourselves, on our own capabilities and our own force, and refrain from listening to the American idea of we'll take care of it. They don't, and they use it in order to pressure us.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Tobin, editor-in-chief of the Jewish News Syndicate, JNS.org, and you're listening to Top Story, a weekly podcast where I analyze the most important stories happening in Jewish news around the world. Each week, I will break down politics, foreign policy, and culture to provide insights into what is going on behind the headlines. Hello, and welcome to Top Story. Thank you for joining us. We have a lot to talk about today, including a discussion about a number of outrageous anti-Semitic incidents, and then an important interview with Yossi Kuperwasser, one of Israel's leading experts on security in the Middle East conflict. But before we start, I want to encourage everyone to like this video and podcast, subscribe to JNS, and click on the bell for notifications. Also, we would love to hear from you. Please write to us at editor@jns.org and let us know where you listen or watch the show and what you think about it. And now to today's program. We spend a lot of time on this program and JNS's reporting discussing the rise of left-wing anti-Semitism and how its advocates and fellow travelers have, in contrast to the extremists of the far right, a lot more influence on major institutions and governments. Left-wing Jew hatred has representation in Congress in the form of left-wing squad, led by AOC, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and the way it is tolerated by the Democrats' Progressive Caucus. It has been normalized on college campuses, as recent outrageous incidents at the University of California at Berkeley and Wellesley College in Boston have again shown us. But today, I want to focus on the way Jew hatred is finding a foothold elsewhere in outlets that cater to conservatives and those who generally reject the groupthink mindset imposed on the nation by the chattering classes. In two separate instances, we've seen how open anti-Semites have been mainstreamed by people that conservatives laud, podcaster Joe Rogan and Fox News Channel host Tucker Carlson. Joe Rogan's decision to grant a platform to Pink Floyd frontman and anti-Israel zealot Roger Waters is being defended as just one more instance of the country's leading podcast pushing the envelope when it comes to controversial speakers. Rogan became a piñata for many on the left because of his willingness to engage in dialogue with figures like social critic Jordan Peterson and skeptics of the government's COVID-19 policies. Indeed, many leading artists sought to organize a boycott of the Spotify service where Rogan is heard in order to get him deplatformed for not agreeing to suppress dissent from liberal orthodoxy. That effort rightly failed, and Rogan continues to thrive with an average estimated 11 million listeners to each of his episodes. But having already cried wolf about Rogan, liberals have little credibility when they criticize him for a show in which a notorious anti-Semite like Waters was able to spout hatred for Israel, along with myths and lies about its measures of self-defense against the Palestinian war to destroy it, without being challenged or contradicted. Waters didn't merely engage in criticisms of Israel. He floated conspiracy theories about the Jewish state would justify Palestinian terrorism from groups like Hamas and spread the apartheid state lie about Israel. All the while, the host Rogan agreed with his lies about Israel's existence being an exercise in segregation, apartheid, and racism, and allowed his guests to claim that none of this was anti-Semitic. The same week, Carlson hosted West, who now calls himself Ye, and gave him the opportunity to speak for the entire hour of his highly rated show. Carlson has become something of a tribune for conservatives for his forthright condemnations of the Black Lives Matter riots in 2020, as well as for his willingness to speak out on other issues that those on the political right care about. That made him a target for the left, with groups like the Anti-Defamation League seeking to deplatform him for his discussions of so-called replacement theory about immigration. That said more about the ADL's partisanship than Carlson, since the idea that demographic change will alter American politics is an idea that began and continues to be advocated for by Democrats. But as is the case with Rogan, the fact that liberal groups like the ADL have already cried wolf about Carlson makes it easier for him to dismiss criticisms when he actually does something to mainstream hate. That was the case with the Kanye West interview. Carlson embraced West because some of what he says is in line with conservative views about race baiting, such as his endorsement of a White Lives Matter t-shirt, and his opposition to abortion. On the Carlson show, the rapper fashion mogul was allowed to claim that Jared Kushner pursued the Abraham Accords for financial profit rather than to advance peace. Now, Carlson is unique among leading conservative media figures in that he is not a supporter of Israel, though he is careful to stay away from discussions about the Jewish state on his program, lest he run afoul of mainstream conservative opinion, which is overwhelmingly Zionist. That means Israel is a word that is almost never heard from 8 to 9 p.m. on Fox News. But it is not surprising that Carlson would allow one of the Trump administration's greatest triumphs to be denigrated in this manner. While Carlson trumpeted the interview as proof that West was not, as many claim, a disturbed individual or a hate monger, what was left out of the broadcast was as interesting as what was left in. In outtakes that have subsequently been published, West made numerous allusions to hateful Jewish stereotypes and even echoed the claims of the Black Israelite sect that African Americans were the real Jews, thus in effect denying the existence of a Jewish people. That Carlson would leave this out of his show demonstrates that he was attempting to hide West's anti-Semitism. Days later, West dropped the veil with a series of tweets in which he said he was going to go to DEFCON 3 against the Jewish people and repeated his attacks on Jewish peoplehood. Yet conservative talker Candace Owens defended him, in essence instructing Jews on what is or isn't anti-Semitism. Now, like liberals circling the wagons around left-wing haters of Israel and the Jews, Carlson and Owens are doing the same for West, and for the same reason. In each case, legitimizing anti-Semitism is considered justified if it defends a political ally, regardless of the consequences. What happens at Wellesley and Berkeley, or what is said on Rogan, Carlson, or on Owens' talk shows, do not by themselves mean that all of the guardrails against anti-Semitism in American society have been removed. But taken together, they demonstrate how anti-Semitic attitudes and statements are increasingly legitimized in mainstream discourse. That means it's no good pretending that Jew hatred is only a problem on just the left or on the right. It exists on both sides of the political aisle, and the obligation of decent people, no matter where their political loyalties lie, to unambiguously condemn them wherever these hate mongers are to be found. That too many otherwise decent people are either ignoring these incidents or downplaying them because speaking out means offending allies rather than political foes isn't just a disgrace. It provides the explanation for why anti-Semitism is coming back into fashion in some quarters, where we once thought it had become extinct. And now to today's interview, where we'll switch our focus back to the Middle East. The recent upsurge in Palestinian terrorism, the ongoing debate about how to solve or manage the conflict with the Palestinians, the threat from Iran, and the recent maritime agreement with Lebanon are much in the news. To discuss all this, we're fortunate to have with us one of the country's leading experts on security issues. Reserve Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser is director of the Project on Regional Middle East Developments at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. He has had a long and distinguished career in the Israeli Defense Forces, where he served, among other posts, as head of the research division of the IDF military intelligence. He was also Director General of the Israeli Ministry of Strategic Affairs. Yossi Kuperwasser, welcome to Top Story.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we're really thrilled you can come on. I want to thank you for coming on the program with us today. There's certainly a lot to discuss in terms of security and diplomatic issues that Israel is dealing with today. I want to start with what is, as we speak, the issue that is at the top of the news, a draft agreement largely sponsored by the Biden administration that has been struck by Israel's interim government with Lebanon over the boundaries of offshore natural gas fields. The Biden administration and interim Prime Minister Yair Lapid are claiming it is a historic breakthrough that will stave off war with Hezbollah, while former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is characterizing it as a surrender to terrorists. Who's right here?
Well, everybody a little bit exaggerates, but I would say that having an agreement with Lebanon is a good idea. And having an agreement about the maritime boundaries is even a better idea, because everybody wants to get the best out of the resources that are laying there and waiting for somebody to extract them in the sea next to our borders, next to our shores. But at the same time, I must say that the way this has been done is very problematic. And it's problematic because of a long series of problems. First and foremost amongst them is that actually it's clear that we did it because we were afraid of confronting Hezbollah. And this transpires as a success, achievement for Hezbollah, which means that they would immediately translate it into a very strong argument in the debate they are involved in Lebanon about the legitimacy of them being an armed organization inside Lebanon. Now, they claim all the time that they need to stay like that because they are the shield that protects Lebanon against Israel, and because their force is the one that can assure Lebanon all kinds of achievements vis-a-vis Israel. And we have to say, the truth is that what happened was exactly that. And they launched two UAVs towards the Karish gas rig, and that was it. Israel caved in, changed the position that it had for 10 years of negotiations, and said, okay, take it all. It's all yours. Just don't shoot. And and they didn't even shoot one rocket. They got everything they wanted. Israel gave up on everything. I mean, there was the debate where the line is going to be. We wanted line 29 to 291. They wanted 230. Every negotiation should end up probably somewhere in the middle, 270. But no, we gave them everything. We went all the way to 230, which means that we give up something like probably $4 billion, because instead of getting 40% of their revenues coming from the Kana gas field, we are going to get only 17%. So we gave...
Assuming that Israel ever actually gets anything from that side of the
Assuming that we get something, assuming we reach an agreement, and assuming there is gas over there, and assuming somebody is going to do something about this gas and produce it, assuming all of these assumptions, eventually we are going to get $4 billion less than what we were supposed to get, not according to our request and demands, but according to some reasonable compromise. That is what we did. Now, it's not about the money. I mean, Israel can live without the $4 billion. I hope so. But it's about the way it is being done. You give it up just because somebody was threatening you. And this is the way it appears. And this is a big mistake. Secondly, and I'm saying, and this is something that's going to have an impact on the future, because Hezbollah reads our cards very well, and will say to themselves, okay, they are afraid from us. We were very deterred in the last 16 years since the war in 2006. We used the time in order to accumulate a lot of rockets and other capabilities that we can use against Israel, and we reached a situation where they are deterred and not us. So, okay, if this is a situation, we can do more. And I can give Hezbollah a list of issues on which they can ask more than what they used to get. For example, let's take something that's very critical for our security. The issue of the flights Israel carry out in the Lebanese skies for gaining information about what's going on in Lebanon and what's going on in Syria. I'm sure that the Lebanese Hezbollah would look at it and say, we always said that Israel should not be allowed to do that. This is 1701 and all of these things. So let's move now that we managed to force Israel to accept all our demands on the gas and the maritime boundary. Next, maybe the freedom to fly over Lebanon or the Shaba farms or whatever. They will find an issue. And this is, and we shall approach the new issue, and it's a protection. We shall have to keep paying the protection.
And, it is kind of like a storekeeper paying a gangster,
exactly,
not to attack his storefront.
Yeah. And the storekeeper makes the calculation that still, even if he pays the ransom, the protection fee, still he's going to earn something. So it's at least he earns his life. So he pays, and that's where we stand today. It's totally ridiculous, but that's where we are. And it's not true that we are that weak. We are capable of dealing with Hezbollah. Yes, it's not going to be nice, but Hezbollah is going to suffer very heavy blows if we end up confronting Hezbollah. And nevertheless, we decided not to, in this chicken game, we decided not to play, and we were the chicken. And this is a very problematic issue. Second issue that I'm worried about is the fact that what do you read from all this behavior of Israel? For 10 years, we conduct negotiations about something that we demand, and we claim that we have a basis for our claims. And all of a sudden, and this was true not only for the Netanyahu government, this was true also for the Bennett government. The Bennett government conducted the same kind of negotiations. They were asking all kinds of things and claiming that we have a basis, a legal basis to our demands. And then all of a sudden we give up on everything. So why did we argue for 10 years about something we don't believe that we have a sound argument about? Because if we have a sound argument, how come we give up on that? We end up in a very problematic position. And third problem is that we do it under pressure from the United States, and we do it based on some American guarantees, which is, in my mind, we don't need American guarantees for our security vis-a-vis our neighbors. We should be able to deal with our neighbors with our own force. If Hezbollah doesn't follow the agreement, or Lebanon, which is Hezbollah, follow the agreement, we should be able to deal with the matter with our own force and not rely on the Americans. And the Americans operate under the assumption that we have already distanced ourselves from, that there is some sort of an entity called Lebanon that is distinct from Hezbollah, and it's some sort of a competitor with Hezbollah. We know this is not the case. The case is that Lebanon is governed by Hezbollah. It's very much impacted by Hezbollah. That is the situation. It's not really an independent country that tries to disarm and tries to have the monopoly over the use of force. They don't have any monopoly over the use of force. The one that has a monopoly over the use of force in a state is Hezbollah. So this means that Hezbollah is the ruler of Lebanon. And we sort of go on and play this game that the Americans are trying to convince us that we should play. And we're talking about improving the situation of the people of Lebanon and all this. This is nonsense. What we did was against the interest of the people of Lebanon, because those people of Lebanon that want to see an independent Lebanon, a Lebanon that is capable of taking care of its citizens, a Lebanon that doesn't work according to an Iranian dictate through Hezbollah, but work for the well-being of the people of Lebanon, these people are now in a much worse condition, because after Nasrallah gained all this credibility as the protector of Lebanon, he's going to say, forget about me disarming my Hezbollah. Look, I'm really providing you with all kinds of achievements. And that's why I think that this deal is problematic. Now, on top of that, there are a lot of details that everybody speaks about, and they are correct. We gave up not only parts of our exclusive economic zone, the EEZ, which is bad by itself, but we also gave part of our what we have declared as our territory, the territorial water, and this is it's not a minor issue. It's I don't remember many countries giving up their territorial water to their neighbors, and for what? We didn't get anything in return, except for some quiet for the short term. That's what we got in return. So yes, I'm not underestimating the fact that we shall be able to extract gas from the Karish field, but Karish was nobody claimed that Karish is not in Israel. Everybody, including the Lebanese, accepted that Karish is in Israel. So to make a fuss out of the fact that we shall be able to operate Karish, it's a little bit strange. The same with the buoys line. Nobody questioned the presence of the buoys over there. They never accepted it. They don't accept it now. They don't accept its legality now. But they say what they said before, that this is the status quo, and they accept this kind of status quo. Okay, nice. And yes, the immediate danger of escalation was probably taken care of. But we should pay the price later on with other attempts of Hezbollah to charge us with prices. If we are deterred, why not?
Yeah, I think that's all very true. I'd like to focus for a minute back on something that you've mentioned, which is that this was largely the result of American pressure. There was reporting about a conversation between President Biden and Prime Minister Lapid at the end of August, in which Biden pretty much laid down the law, saying he wanted this agreement, and it apparently, that Lapid jumped and made it happen. But I think this also shows the contrasting approaches to Middle East diplomacy used by the Biden administration and its predecessors under Trump. The Lebanon deal seems, I think, to follow a familiar pattern involving American pressure, Israeli concessions in the form of tangible withdrawals in exchange for promises. The Trump team seemed to focus more on trying to leverage common interests between Israel and the Arab states to get to the Abraham Accords. Right now, it appears that few in the international community or the U.S. foreign policy establishment, or even a lot of people in Israel, seem to have learned any of the lessons from that. So are we just doomed to keep repeating the same pattern of diplomatic endeavors endlessly in the absence of a Trump or a Trump-like figure in the White House to sort of try to change it, and with Israelis either, jumping to American demands or saying no to them?
I'm afraid yes. What should I say? Yes, this pattern repeats itself so many times that I'm afraid it's going to repeat itself in the future as well. I'm worried in this respect in two different arenas. First and foremost, I'm worried about the Israeli-Palestinian arena, because this idea of giving us guarantees that we shall rely upon when we make all kinds of concessions was exactly what General Allen tried to do some eight years ago with the effort led by Secretary Kerry at the time to give us some security guarantees that will allow us to allow the establishment of a Palestinian state, and the Americans will take care of all the problems. I thought at the time that this was a terrible suggestion, and fortunately on that one we refused. Not everyone, some people thought it's a good idea, but the government decided to refuse, and we were not led in this direction. And the same thing on Iran. It's again and again we are given the guarantee that in the end of the day, when time comes, the Iranians are willing to get closer and be able to produce nuclear weapons. The Americans guarantee us that they will not allow Iran to become a nuclear weapon state. Well, I don't believe they are able to do that, and I'm not sure that they are going to be willing to do that. And because of that, I think that on all these issues we should rely on ourselves, on our own capabilities and our own force, and refrain from listening to the American idea of we'll take care of it. They don't, and they use it in order to pressure us. I mean, they used it in 2012 in order to convince us not to carry out an attack in Iran. Maybe it was a good idea, maybe it was not. I don't know. It's very difficult to know. But definitely this was the case. They were saying, we'll take care of it. And we see where we stand today. We are very close to Iran having the capability to produce nuclear weapons. So,
yeah, that's what I really wanted to turn to next, because it's also related to the negotiations with Lebanon, the Biden push to basically resume appeasement in the form of a nuclear agreement that Tehran does not seem that eager to re-enter, even on the most favorable terms. For now, the negotiations in Vienna have halted, and it's possible that the Iranians will string the talks out indefinitely. But there's also the very real possibility that after the November midterm elections in the United States, that President Biden will be prepared to go further in making even more concessions to Iran than before. Where do you see that negotiation heading? And is Israel basically helpless, as just looking on, waiting to see if Iran will just keep saying no, that's the only way that an agreement that is really dangerous to Israel will be avoided?
Yeah, in a way we're lucky, because the Iranians took upon themselves to save us from the potential re-entering of the agreement. And the reason they decided to do that is that, first of all, nobody stops them on the way to having the capability to produce nuclear weapons under the current situation. Everybody speaks about how dangerous the situation is. Everybody speaks about how something should be done, but nobody is ready to do something. So they keep getting closer and closer, and why stop? And just the last couple of days, we hear about the activation of a new cascade of advanced centrifuges in Natanz and in Fordow, and they're moving forward. So why stop? If not, nobody's going to hold them. Secondly, they see how they can convince the West, including the United States, to accept any of their demands. So this creates some sort of a hubris on the Iranian side, and say to themselves, okay, maybe we can ask more. Let's ask for more. And the last demand that they have raised is that the IAEA would close the investigation into the 3-4 sites in which some nuclear activity was carried out without declaring about it. Those cases are cases in which Iran breached the NPT, not the JCPOA. And they want it to be closed. And that's the demand. They wouldn't re-enter the JCPOA unless these cases are closed. And we didn't hear clear message from the United States saying, no, we shall refuse to do that. The one that is keen on not accepting the Iranian conditions is the Director General of the IAEA, Dr. Grossi. But the Americans are not clear on this issue at all. And so I'm worried, just like what you said, that after the elections, right now it's not a good time to make this move, but after the elections in the States, which is also after the elections in Israel, the U.S. administration will continue playing around with this idea. And they say that the State Department keeps saying all the time that the window is still open. The window is still open. We don't see any other alternative, and so on and so forth. But while this window is open, the Iranians have already accumulated considerable amounts of 60% enriched uranium, which is very close to 90%, which is the military grade. They have enough 60% for more than one nuclear device, 1.5 already, maybe closer to 2. And they have enough 20% enriched uranium and 4.5% enriched uranium for something like, let's say, 4 to 5 bombs altogether with the 60%, or 5 to 4 nuclear devices. Let's put it this way, it's not yet a bomb. And they can reach that within 3 to 4 months. The first one can be reached within a couple of weeks, 2 weeks, if they just decide to move in this direction. This is an unbelievable situation. Nobody has ever dreamt that something like that can happen. And it's happening and nobody's doing anything. They all say they are not going to accept a nuclear Iran. Very nice. But you have to do something about it. And nothing is being done. And, the temptation.
Well, what you're describing is that, Iran is already basically a nuclear threshold state as we're speaking, something that the United States has always said it wouldn't tolerate, and indeed that Israel has said that it wouldn't tolerate. And yet, here we are.
The Americans never said they are not going to tolerate an Iranian threshold state. They said they want to keep them away from there, but they didn't say they are not going to tolerate it. What they've said in the past is that we are not going to allow Iran to obtain nuclear weapons, but they never said they are not going to allow Iran to have the capability to produce nuclear weapons. That's where we are today. Israel is another question mark, because Israel in the past, if you remember the famous drawing that Netanyahu brought to the UN General Assembly back in 2012, the red line at the time that he drew said that if Iran has more than 250 kilograms of 20% enriched uranium, Israel would consider it a threshold state and would do something about it. And the Iranians never crossed this line at the time. They reached the 250, never crossed it. Today, they have long crossed that line, and Israel does nothing. So we are in a situation where now there's a big question mark about how long is it going to take from having the enough fissile material for a nuclear device until they turn it into a bomb. That's a big question mark that nobody knows the answer, I would say. But judging by the fact that we know today much more about how much progress was done in the Ahmad project back in 2003, and based on the fact that we see today the Iranians producing uranium metal from their 20%, maybe even 60% enriched uranium, and bearing in mind that there is no sort of monitoring of the experts they have, and the scientists nobody knows where they are and what they're doing. So, I mean, we know what the people that are involved in enrichment are doing, but we don't know anything about those who are involved in the weapon group. And this means that maybe they're doing something we don't want them to do. So I would say if I were an Iranian, if I was interested in producing a nuclear weapon based on what the capabilities I have, I understand that the vulnerable time that I have is once I move towards 90%, and I still don't have the technology to turn the 90% enriched uranium into a bomb. So logic tells you that they might be doing something as we speak. And we should have some much better monitoring in order to know that they don't, and to make sure that they don't. And I'm worried that the time they would need is going to be shorter than what many people wish it was. And, many people mentioned that 2 years. I'm not at all sure about it. My feeling is that it's less than 2 years. How much less? Difficult to say.
Yeah. Well, I think you've sketched that out very clearly. Let's turn now to the ongoing conflict with the Palestinians. In recent weeks, we've seen an increase in Palestinian terrorism directed at Jews and Israelis. Does this reflect a tactical decision by the Palestinian leadership to try and get the world's attention now that they realize that not even the Biden administration, was going to bite on their overtures, and that it realizes that there's no point in negotiating with a party that isn't interested in a resolution? Or is this something more organic, a more organic development that reflects Palestinian frustration with the status quo, and therefore perhaps can be addressed in some way by more peace talks? Where do we stand with that?
Well, I think both are true. First of all, there's the basic narrative that the Palestinians are being fed with day in, day out. This narrative says that there's no Jewish people, no such thing. Jews are just a religious sect. There's no history, there's no sovereign history of Jews in the land called Israel or Palestine. Unlike the Palestinians, who are the indigenous people of this land, which is, of course, a joke. It says that the Jews are terrible creatures, and you can see it today because they practice apartheid and they kill children and all kinds of things that are terrible. But this is something embedded in the Jews from ancient days. Abu Mazen repeatedly tells his audiences, these are the Jews. And no wonder they carried out 50 Holocausts against the Palestinians and so on and so forth. And if you read the Palestinian papers, they are all about, from page 1 to page 4, they are all about the terrible behavior of the Jews and the Israelis. And it's the same message delivered through the textbooks in schools and in the sermons in the mosques and by what the leaders are saying and by all the cultural sources that the ordinary Palestinians get to see. And this is the message is getting every day. And the conclusion, because of all these things, is that the Jews don't have a right to live here, and definitely not a right to have a state of their own here. And we, as Palestinians, should struggle against this unjust situation. And we can struggle in many ways. We can struggle by writing poems. We can struggle by sticking to the land. We can struggle by political activity. We can struggle by all kinds of active policies like BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions policy. We can struggle by building all kinds of new settlements in the Area C, Palestinian settlements. We have a lot of ways to struggle. But of course, all these struggle means are legitimate, including those who are violent. We can use violence, and this is totally legitimate for us to use violence in order to promote our goals. And we can debate from time to time whether the violence that we should use is going to be such that includes weapons and firearms and explosives, or whether we should stick to what we call the popular resistance or the peaceful popular resistance, which means using hurling stones and throwing Molotov cocktails and knife attacks and car ramming and things like that. We can argue. Usually Abu Mazen would stand with those who prefer the second option, not to use firearms. But at certain times, and here comes the second issue that you raised, at certain times when we are extremely frustrated because of everything that's going on around us, we are allowed also to use the firearms. And of course, Abu Mazen will never say it, but everything he's doing is leading the Palestinians in this direction. We have to remember, Abu Mazen is paying the terrorists in our jails. He pays them salaries, wonderful salaries. 7% of the Palestinian budget goes to these salaries. Even the United States adopted the Taylor Force Act that prevents the United States government from giving money to the Palestinian Authority as long as they pay these salaries. So unfortunately, the Biden administration was very busy trying to find ways to bypass this Taylor Force Act that prevented it, and the Israelis too were trying to find ways in which they can give all kinds of assistance to the Palestinian Authority in spite of the law that the Israelis have adopted that says that we shall deduct the amount of money that the Palestinians pay as salaries to terrorists from the money we give them based on the fact that we collect for them taxes. And we do that, but at the same time we give them the same amount of money in other channels. That's a pity. But nevertheless, the message the Palestinians get is that at certain times you have to accelerate the pace in which you use, or the ways in which you use terrorism. And that's what we're seeing today. It's coming from the messages coming from Abu Mazen, from Hamas, from Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and we see most of the people that are involved in the attacks do not belong to any of these. They belong to all of these at the same time, and they actually operate according to what they believe their people expect them to do, and they get popular support because of that, and popular and government support. And yes, there are some elements within the Palestinian Authority that are trying to send a different message, and they should be appreciated. But most of the government says that this is something they support. They feel good with, and that's a big pity, because we were expecting the Palestinians to behave differently and to really sit to the table and accept the fact that they are dealing with the nation state of the Jewish people that has a claim for this land. We understand there are disputed lands between us, and we are ready to help them govern these areas that they are in charge of, but not at any price. That's something that we have to understand. We have to clarify to them and to many others that how far we are ready to go with this kind of attitude. I mean, the frustration, by the way, the frustration you were mentioning and that I was speaking about comes from not only because of the fact that they realize that the United States has lost the appetite to be involved in another attempt to bring a final peace agreement, but because they see what's happening around us in the Arab world. The Arabs have lost interest in being hostages of the Palestinian issue.
Exactly.
They move forward. And that's something really frustrating for the Palestinians raised. But I believe that in the long run, this frustration is if we stick to the movement in strengthening the Abraham Accords, eventually the Palestinians will understand, what can we do? This is a new reality, and we have to adjust. It's not for tomorrow morning, but in the end, in my mind, there is a chance that it will happen. And we saw the Palestinians in the past trying to tactically adjust to all kinds of changes that were not in their favor, like after the 73 war and after Lebanon. They realized from time to time that they have to make some changes. And that's how we reached the Oslo agreements, that were a big mistake by Israel, but also reflected some sort of flexibility, tactical flexibility on behalf of the Palestinians.
Since there is a real consensus, I think, within Israel that there's no point in negotiation with the Palestinian Authority in its current iteration, let alone Hamas, what can Israel do to deal with the problem of terrorism, or in managing the ongoing stalemate? Or is this just a problem without a solution that has lasted for 50 years and could last for decades longer, so long as the political culture of the Palestinians is unchanged?
Well, first of all, we have to convince ourselves that what you said in the end might be true. We have to make the consciousness preparations for a situation where this is going to take a long time, a very long time, with ups and downs, and but there's not going to be a solution, because I don't see the Palestinians giving up their narrative anytime soon. Any change in the narrative is going to take a very long time. I'm not totally pessimistic, as I said before. I think eventually some changes may take place, but it's going to take a long time. And until that happens, there's going to be a lot of terror, a lot of friction, and we have to be prepared mentally to this situation. And it's not easy, because many people in Israel, even if they understand it, they don't feel like it. They don't want to see that happening. They want to be focused on having a better life. The dream of the Israelis is to have an exit, to come up with some sort of a startup and to end it up with an exit. That's what they're focused on. And most of these startups are things that are going to make the world a better place. So we even feel good about being involved in those things. That's the main issue. And at the same time, we have to take care of the situation in Jerusalem, the situation in the Judea and Samaria areas, the situation in Gaza, the situation with Lebanon. All of these issues are disturbing us. It's a nuisance. It's something we don't want to live with. Secondly, we have to be able to carry out the necessary operations against terror that will make it more difficult for the terrorists to operate. And for that purpose, we should act more than we do today. We move to the break wave or wave break operation for several months now. It is, of course, better than what used to happen before when we had terror attacks inside Israel itself. But it's not giving a solution. So we have to be more active to take harsher and greater operations against the Lion's Den group and the other groups in Jenin and in Nablus, and against other groups that are operating all over the territories. And we have to realize we have to act stronger. There's no way that the Palestinian Authority is going to take care of this situation. Some people dream that this may happen. It's only if we carry out a very strong operation, then the Palestinian Authority can intervene and say, okay, you saw what the Israelis are doing. If you don't want that to repeat itself, you'd better lay off your weapons. But before that, this is not going to happen. Third, we have to convince the Palestinian Authority, together with the Americans and others like the Europeans and the Arabs, to give up some of the support it gives to terrorism. They have to stop incitement. They have to stop the payments of salaries to the terrorists, and give up the law. You know, they have a law according to which they pay these salaries. We have to convince them to stop it. And until now, I don't see a very clear approach by the international community and by Israel itself to convince the Palestinians, listen, this has to stop. And what we hear from Abu Mazen again and again, that this is the last thing he's going to do. He is going to pay salaries to terrorists until, even if he has only 1 penny, 1 cent, he is going to spend it on salaries to terrorists. This way you cannot imagine that something is going to change in the basic consciousness that the Palestinians have. But and fourth and last, what we have to do is to find a way to encourage those elements within the Palestinian society that do have a different approach, and work directly with them, directly with the population that is ready to cooperate, and strengthen them, and make a differentiation between those who are against some sort of quiet and between those who are in favor of that. We don't do that enough. We do that a little bit here and there, but not enough. These are the things I think we should do.
Mm-hmm. Now, Yair Lapid has reiterated his support for the concept of an independent Palestinian state. But does anyone seriously believe this is still possible absent a sea change in Palestinian thinking that would allow them to make peace on any terms, no matter where Israel's borders are drawn? Or is this discussion mostly aimed at Washington and Europe rather than at Israeli domestic opinion?
It's definitely directed towards Europe and the United States. That's the main target audience for this message. Also, maybe for some elements within the Israeli political scene, the Arab parties and the Meretz and maybe the Labour Party, to say, well, you can count on me. Could be. But most of the Israelis, as you say, have no illusions about the possibility of reaching an agreement about the Palestinian state before the Palestinians make all kinds of changes. I was worried about what Lapid said, not because mentioning of the two-state solution. Unfortunately, this time he said 2 states for 2 peoples. That was better than what he said when he was sitting actually next to President Biden when he was here in Israel, and where he just said, I'm in favor of 2-state solution without saying 2 states for 2 people. So this time he said 2 states for 2 people. It would be nice if he would mention that one of them is the Jewish people. But let's assume that that's what he meant. I mean, when the Palestinians speak about it, they also always speak about 2-state solution without mentioning the 2 peoples. And if they're forced to say to 2 peoples, they mean one of them is the Palestinian people, the other is the Israeli people, people that they have invented. That means that Israel is the state of all its citizens and not a nation state of the Jewish people, with equal rights to all its citizens. That's. But what he said in the UN General Assembly, I was concerned because he mentioned only actually one condition for getting there, and this was giving up the terror. If you just give up terrorism, we'll be able to move towards having a Palestinian state. And this is not, we have to deal with the roots of terror, not only with the presence of terror. We have to make sure that this narrative changes. We have to make sure that the Palestinians accept Israel as a nation state of the Jewish people. And I must say that the Americans are more clear about that than Lapid. So it's a little bit, I don't know why he didn't mention it. But it should be an Israeli prerequisite for moving there. And I don't see that happening anytime soon. Nobody believes that it's going to happen anytime soon. So the prospects of a Palestinian state in the foreseeable future are very slim, or close to none.
Now, Mahmoud Abbas, Abu Mazen, as you alluded to earlier, managed to briefly get some headlines recently by claiming while he was in Germany, of all places, that Israel had perpetrated 50 Holocausts. Some dismiss this as merely hyperbole for a leader who always speaks in different ways to different audiences. But does this clinging to the Nakba narrative mean that, what does this mean about Israel's supposed sins, and really tell us a lot more about the way Palestinian leaders think than many of the left want to acknowledge, especially when you consider that Abbas is serving in the 17th year of a 4-year term to which he was elected and is now 87 years old. So at some point there has to be a successor. Can you tell us about any possible successors to Abbas and whether they represent a chance for progress toward peace or merely more of the same?
First of all, I would say that Abu Mazen said it because he believes in it. He believes that the Jews are terrible and that they are carrying out all kinds of terrible stuff against the Palestinians. And that's why he said it. And he repeated it, and he came back to the Nakba narrative in his presentation, in his address to the General Assembly. He really believes in all these things. He repeats it again and again. He has a special effort to destroy the Israeli narrative. That's an effort of Abu Mazen all the time, and he really believes in it. Now, talking about who's going to be the Palestinian leader after Abbas, it's a very big question. Of course, Abbas is trying to groom Hussein al-Sheikh and Majid Faraj, which are the extension of Abbas for another period. They have a chance. They make a lot of efforts to make sure that they control all the source of power in the Fatah, especially because the Fatah is really the power that rules the Palestinian Authority, and beyond the Fatah, in the Palestinian Authority itself, in the security forces and all of that. They have a better chance than anybody else at this point of time because they prepare themselves while Abu Mazen is still alive to take over if he leaves. But they are not Abu Mazen. Abu Mazen enjoys the fact that he was from the founding fathers and everybody.
Yes, that he was an associate of Arafat.
Yeah, so he's a special guy. There's nobody like him, and that claims to take over. And so I believe that everybody is preparing themselves, not only Hussein al-Sheikh and Majid Faraj, but everybody is preparing themselves for this eventuality. Hamas is preparing themselves all over the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. Jibril Rajoub prepares himself. All kinds of local landlords prepare themselves. So we may end with all kinds of strange situations where certain elements, certain parts of the Palestinian Authority are going to be ruled by some elements and some other parts by other elements. And we see today that actually Nablus is being run by the Lion Dance group, and Jenin is being run by another group, that the Brigade of Jenin. And the Palestinian Authority is losing control of these areas, and even if they wanted to take care of the terrorists over there, on those who ignore the order and the law and order, they are not able to do that. So it's we can have in Hebron there are all kinds of clans that may fight each other. They fight each other anyhow. It's, now they do it with the presence of the Palestinian Authority. Tomorrow they can do it without. It's in fact it may collapse. The notion of a Palestinian Authority. The Palestinians don't want it to disappear, even though they have a lot of criticism against the Palestinian leadership because of corruption, because of the fact that they ignore human rights of their own citizens. So the Palestinians are very critical of the Palestinian Authority leadership. But I don't think they want the Palestinian Authority as the most important achievement of the Palestinian national movement to disappear. They want it to stay, but are they able to make it stay? This is a big question mark. And the best candidates to make it stay are Faraj and Hussein al-Sheikh on the one hand, and Hamas on the other. Obviously, from an Israeli point of view, we would rather have Hussein al-Sheikh and Majid Faraj than Hamas. But we have to understand, Hussein al-Sheikh and Majid Faraj are not the Israeli great dream. They are just the extension of Abu Mazen.
Do you anticipate some kind of civil war breaking out, possibly? It certainly happened in Gaza, where Hamas was able to execute a coup against Fatah there. The assumption is that Israel wouldn't allow Hamas to take power in Ramallah. But is that true? I mean, what are the options there? Is anything possible once Abbas leaves the scene?
Well, first of all, there may be more than just one civil war. That's because basically the Palestinian Authority is made of 9 cities spread all over the place. And in each one there are local landlords that are loosely connected to some powers in Ramallah on the national level. So each one of them may end up fighting for the control of the territory where it is placed. And it's more than just one civil war. It's more complicated with the Palestinians. That's, I think, something that we should bear in mind. If Hamas tries to take over, whether Israel is going to do something, yes, there's a possibility that if Israel needs to, it will have to take control of the territory. It's the last thing we want to do. But it's not something that it's not eventuality that we can rule out. It can definitely happen, unfortunately, because if there's going to be a void and total chaos, it's going to affect us, and we will have to intervene. We don't want that to happen, but we may find ourselves obliged to do that.
Yeah, I want to just one more question briefly. One of the points of conflict between Jews and Arabs, certainly in Jerusalem, is the Temple Mount. Much of the world seems to agree with the Palestinians that it ought to be a no-go zone for Jews visiting, let alone praying. But many Israelis, and I think a growing number, argue that it's the only place in the country where freedom of worship is not protected because Jews are formally forbidden from praying at their holiest site. Is there any reasonable solution to this problem, or is this simply one that will go on being an issue that Palestinian leaders will use to help incite hatred and violence?
The Palestinians use the slogan that Al-Aqsa is in danger to promote their fight against the Jews since 1921. So it's not something new. And it works. Whenever they need some more fervor of the struggle against Zionism, they know where to go. And it's a tool that they wouldn't like to lose in their ability to mobilize the people to take the necessary steps in the struggle against Zionism. And we have to understand, they are in the struggle against Zionism until its demise. They are not going to stop anywhere, even if they have a state. They are not going to stop there because they believe that Haifa and Tiberia are just as important and part of the Palestinian territory as are Ramallah or Hebron. So that's the struggle, and they will keep using the Al-Aqsa story. Whether we pray there, whether we don't pray there, whether we enter, whether we don't enter, this is a pretext that is being used. On top of that, some of them really care about the presence of Jews in something that's called sanctuary, Haram Sharif. So they don't want Jews to be there. So for some, those who are mainly seeing it, looking at it from a religious lens, yes, that's something that worries them. But it's not the majority. Even for them, we saw it with the escalation last year. It was the same happened a year later. Nothing happened. It's a year before they turned it into something that they needed an excuse. They took it as an excuse. It depends on the context. They know how to use this issue, and so it's not only about Hamas. Abu Mazen knew in his time also to use the same pretext for his interest in the past with the Jerusalem Intifada in 2014 and with the knives Intifada in 2015. That's these people know how to use the right sentences that ignite the people.
Well, Yossi, we want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your insights. You've given us a lot to think about. We also want to thank our audience. Whether you're listening to us on Spotify or any of the other podcast platforms, or watching us live on Facebook or Twitter, or on the JNS YouTube channel, or on JBS TV, please like and or subscribe to Top Story, click on the bell for notifications, and give us good reviews. Please write to us at editor@jns.org and let us know where you listen or watch the show and what you think about it. And remember, keep reading and thinking for yourself, and we'll see you again next week.